"Get your hands off me. I have the right to record this." Those words, shouted by a terrified citizen as ICE agents dragged peaceful protesters across the pavement, capture the very heart of America under Donald Trump's immigration machine. Families terrorized in their homes, veterans with medals stripped of dignity at citizenship hearings, and everyday workers beaten at checkpoints. This is not a dystopian movie scene. It's what actually unfolded on US soil. In this video, we expose how Donald Trump turned ICE from an immigration enforcement agency into a political weapon of fear, targeting not just undocumented migrants, but also families, decorated US Army veterans, and peaceful citizens exercising their constitutional rights. Trump's America First rhetoric masked a campaign of terror that blurred the line between law enforcement and authoritarian control. First, we'll examine the political context that allowed Trump to empower ICE beyond accountability, creating an environment where brutality was not only tolerated but encouraged. Next, we'll dive into the core incidents caught on tape, from veterans being detained at citizenship hearings to families and protesters beaten without warrants. Finally, we'll analyze the broader consequences. What this meant for American democracy, for communities of color, and for the dangerous precedent it sets if left unchecked. By the end of this video, one thing will be clear. Trump's ICE wasn't about security. It was about power, intimidation, and the erosion of basic American freedoms. To understand how ICE became such a destructive tool under Donald Trump, we need to look back at the political climate of 2016 to 2020. Trump's campaign was built on a simple but powerful slogan: build the wall. Immigration wasn't just a policy debate. It became the emotional core of his political identity. The promise to clamp down on migrants resonated with fears about jobs, crime, and cultural change. Once in office, Trump signed a series of executive orders expanding ICE's authority, tearing away the Obama-era guidelines that had focused enforcement primarily on criminals. Suddenly, anyone without full legal status became a target, regardless of background, community ties, or even military service. ICE agents, backed by Trump and hardline allies like Stephen Miller, operated with unprecedented impunity. The political motivation was clear: project strength, fuel the narrative of a nation under siege, and use fear of the other as a rallying cry for Trump's base. Critics pointed out that these actions weren't just about security. They were about consolidating political power by creating an atmosphere of fear, particularly among communities of color and immigrant families. Why does this matter? Because what was at stake wasn't just immigration enforcement. It was the very question of what kind of nation America would become. When veterans who bled for this country could be detained in wheelchairs, when families could be targeted without warrants, and when peaceful citizens could be beaten for recording videos, the issue extended beyond borders. It was about democracy itself. If unchecked, such practices normalized authoritarian behavior under the guise of law and order. Trump didn't just expand ICE. He weaponized it to instill fear in communities across the United States. The agency became less about upholding the law and more about projecting power, creating a climate where intimidation was a deliberate tool. One of the most shocking examples captured on tape came from Los Angeles, where peaceful protesters outside a detention facility were blindsided and dragged across the concrete by ICE agents. A man in a white hoodie stood motionless with his hands raised in surrender, only to be tackled violently. A woman filming the incident can be heard screaming, "What the hell are you doing?" Her words echo the disbelief of a nation watching law enforcement brutalize its own citizens for exercising free speech. This was not random violence. It revealed a strategic use of force designed to silence dissent. By targeting peaceful protesters, ICE under Trump signaled that opposition to government policy could be met with physical violence. It blurred the line between protecting the state and enforcing the will of one man. From a democratic perspective, this is devastating. The right to protest is enshrined in the First Amendment. When ICE assaulted those rights, they were not just targeting individuals. They were sending a message to every American. Resistance will be punished. Perhaps the darkest stain on Trump's ICE record was the targeting of families and veterans, people who posed no threat and in many cases had dedicated their lives to this country. In Alabama, ICE set up a checkpoint with state troopers. They demanded papers from drivers, a chilling reminder of authoritarian regimes. When a man refused to comply, agents broke his arm while forcing him into an unmarked van. An officer was even caught on video mocking him. "Just pop it back. Stop whining." Later, the man was released without charges because he had done nothing wrong except being a brown-skinned American. But it didn't stop there. In Washington state, ICE detained Mohammed Zahed Chowri, a wheelchair-bound U.S. Army veteran. Chowri had lived legally in the U.S. for 25 years and held a green card. He was arrested at his own naturalization hearing in front of his wife, Melissa, and their 2 small children. His service record included multiple medals, from the National Defense Service Medal to the Global War on Terrorism Service Medal. Yet, ICE treated him as a threat. His wife believed the real reason wasn't his record. It was his influence, his principles, and the fact that he was a brown man who spoke with an accent. These 2 cases reveal the sheer cruelty of ICE under Trump. Families and veterans weren't collateral damage. They were direct targets. The checkpoint violence illustrates racial profiling at its rawest form, where skin color became probable cause. The detention of Chowri shows how even veterans, the very people who sacrificed for America's freedom, were not safe from Trump's political agenda. By attacking figures like Chowri, ICE undermined the moral contract between America and its soldiers. Serve your country, and your country will protect you. Trump broke that contract. Despite Trump's heavy-handed tactics, communities across America began resisting ICE's abuse of power. This resistance reveals both the depth of the problem and the resilience of American democracy. In Trenton, New Jersey, ICE agents tried to storm immigrant homes without warrants, but one woman stood in their way, shouting for neighbors to come out. "They don't have a warrant! They don't belong in your house!" she warned. Her cries sparked a community-wide standoff lasting 5 hours, with residents refusing to let ICE take people away unlawfully. Even the mayor condemned the operation, calling out ICE for their disregard of legal process. Another scene unfolded in San Francisco, where peaceful protesters were beaten with batons and bicycles. A journalist, despite showing press credentials, was grabbed by the throat by ICE. These weren't isolated mistakes. They were part of a pattern of lawlessness. Community pushback demonstrated a crucial truth. ICE's power was not absolute. When ordinary citizens demanded accountability, ICE was forced to retreat. This grassroots defiance not only exposed Trump's authoritarian tactics, but also highlighted the fragility of democratic institutions under pressure. It showed that when government agencies abandon the rule of law, it falls to the people to defend it. However, this also underscored a dangerous precedent. Trump's ICE wasn't simply enforcing laws. It was testing how far it could go before Americans would resist. One of the most disturbing consequences of Trump's ICE was the way its actions blurred the line between law enforcement and outright criminality. Footage showed ICE agents masked, refusing to identify themselves. In Houston, 2 criminals even exploited this climate by impersonating ICE officers during a home invasion. Wearing ski masks and bulletproof vests, they claimed to be police serving a warrant. A shootout ensued, leaving the imposters dead. This incident revealed how ICE's refusal to follow basic identification protocols created opportunities for real criminals to exploit fear. When a federal agency becomes indistinguishable from criminals, the system has failed. Trump's ICE made it easy for imposters to terrorize communities because the real agents operated with the same secrecy and disregard for due process. This erosion of trust in law enforcement has long-term consequences. Immigrant families no longer know whether the person at their door is a legitimate officer or a criminal in disguise. That uncertainty is not just dangerous. It is corrosive to the very fabric of public trust in government institutions. What Trump's ICE era revealed was not simply a debate over immigration, it was a stress test for American democracy. When veterans, families, and peaceful protesters can be terrorized under the guise of law and order, it shows how fragile the guardrails of freedom really are. Civil liberties that many assumed were untouchable, like the right to protest, due process, and equal protection, proved vulnerable to executive power wielded recklessly. The long-term implication is chilling. If one administration could normalize brutality, what's to stop the next from pushing even further? The damage extended beyond U.S. borders as well. America, once seen as a global leader on human rights, faced international criticism for its treatment of immigrants and asylum seekers. Reports of family separations, detention camps, and racial profiling became global headlines, undermining U.S. credibility in promoting democracy abroad. In a world where authoritarian regimes justify repression by pointing to American hypocrisy, Trump's ICE policies handed them ammunition. Even after Trump left office, debates over ICE's role continue. Calls for reform or even abolition of the agency have grown louder, fueled by memories of abuse during Trump's term. The Biden administration has rolled back some of the most extreme policies, but communities remain scarred and skeptical. If Trump or a like-minded leader returns to power, ICE could again be weaponized, perhaps more efficiently and ruthlessly. The future hinges on whether Americans demand accountability and ensure that no agency operates above the Constitution. Donald Trump's ICE wasn't just enforcing immigration law. It was systematically terrorizing families, brutalizing peaceful protesters, and even detaining decorated veterans. We saw how ICE checkpoints devolved into racial profiling zones, how communities were forced to rise up in defense of their neighbors, and how the agency blurred the line between law enforcement and lawlessness. These weren't isolated abuses. They were the direct product of a political strategy that turned fear into a weapon. And here's the haunting question. If this could happen to veterans in wheelchairs, to parents in front of their children, and to citizens exercising free speech, then who among us is truly safe when power is unchecked? What ICE became under Trump is a warning. The erosion of rights rarely happens all at once. It creeps in under the guise of security until suddenly freedom itself is in chains. So I want to hear from you. Do you believe ICE can be reformed, or has it become too corrupted to fix? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you found this deep dive valuable, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video, because the only way to fight authoritarianism is to shine a light on it.